Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out today. We are, Sarah and I are two of the 4 assessment faculty fellows, and we're working with Carolyn, and we're super excited about assessment and using rubrics, and we hope today to transfer some of that excitement to you. We know that sometimes professors feel anxious about assessment. They feel really anxious about rubrics, and so our hope is to create some comfort and facility with rubrics today. Okay, so to start, we really wanted to have everyone introduce themselves. If you could just tell us your name, which department you're in, and what brought you here today. We're a small group. It would be nice if we could all just, get to know each other. Can we start over here?
Hi there, my name is Julian. I'm in the Science and Math department, and I'm here because I think unlike many of you who are on the fashion side of things, a lot of my students are not scientists, and so I'm working on how to assess them in a fair but appropriate manner.
Hi, my name is Lee Patrick, and I am in the Spatial Experience Design, Communication Design Pathways department, and I've taught a few classes so far, but I thought it was a good idea to try and get some more help with assessing and rubric design and things like that.
Hi, my name is Mark Paulson. I'm in CFMM, and what brought me here today is because I am actually working on a project on how to better evaluate the CFMM capstone that happens every year, as well as learning how to write a good rubric.
Hi, I'm Jeff Buckman, Marketing Communications. I'm interested in learning and creating rubrics, especially for creative courses. I find that very challenging.
We'll have something for you. Don't worry.
Hi, I'm Mary Kastner. I'm from Production Management, and I'm here today also because of the trying to figure out rubrics for our capstone class.
Hi, I'm Alex Nagel. I'm the chair of the Art History and Museum Professions program, and it's both because we have an internal review coming up also for our program for courses, and of course courses that we develop to learn more about rubrics is important for me too.
Hi, I'm Deborah Hernandez. I teach in textile surface design. Jeffrey's helped me create a rubrics, but last semester, I only teach in the fall, the carpet class. When I was grading, I went, this doesn't work anymore. Students are different. I need help.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Jonas, and I teach now in the Fashion and Textile History in the Grad Studies program. Just one part of a class in the fall, and it's mounting historic costume. And I'm just a beginner, so I'm ready to hopefully start in the right place.
Hi, I'm Sarah Blazer. I'm the interim director of the Writing and Speaking Studio, and I teach in English and Communication Studies. I've been using rubrics a long time and continue to revise them all the time because they don't continue working the same way every semester. So any input is welcome.
Hello, I'm Lourdes Font. I also teach in the master's program in Fashion and Textile Studies, and I teach undergraduates in the History of Art department, and I'm interested in anything that will help to speed grading and also ensure that it is fair.
That's great. I'm so glad that we all got to know each other a little bit, and we can see that, we are representing lots of different departments here and different disciplines, and hopefully there'll be something for everyone here. And we'll just get started. Just so you know, I'm Meg Joseph. I teach in Global Fashion Management in the graduate school, and I'm just a big fan of rubrics and assessment. And the thing is that I've been using different types of rubrics over time. I'm going to share some of my rubrics with you, and I'm continually iterating. we try it, we see how it works, we make changes. We share it with a colleague, what do you think? We make changes, right? It's an ongoing process. Assessment is really a process of continuous improvement, right? So that's what we're doing, and let's just,
introduce myself. I'm Sarah Mullins. I am the Assistant Chair of Footwear and Accessory Design, and I'm here today as an assessment fellow and a Rubrics user, but I also still have lots of room for improvement.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Comiskey. I'm the Executive Director of Assessment. Before I went into administration, I did teach for a few years, and I wish I had known about rubrics way back then. That was a while ago, because I think it would have made my life easier. But in my role as Director of Assessment, at conferences I go to, they talk about rubrics. I read books on rubrics. So I know a lot of rubric theory, but I don't have a lot of experience with the practice. So here we've got sort of theory and practice. But yeah, rubrics can be challenging. Using them, the theory is clear, but then when you put it into practice, there are often a lot of complications.
Okay, great. Let's get started. Learning outcomes for today. Rubrics, right? Assessment. What are we assessing? We're assessing the achievement of learning outcomes. So I'm going to start today with learning outcomes. We want for you to walk away having an understanding of the benefits and uses of rubrics, being able to identify some different types of rubrics, because there are different types. Consider using rubrics in Blackboard or Brightspace, and we're going to show you some examples of that. Begin creating, designing, or revising your own rubric, which we're going to do in our time together. And then recognize the value of rubrics for aggregated assessment. So if any of you are involved in, for example, your program learning outcome assessment reports, those annual reports, or your 5-year review, using rubrics is really a great way to support that assessment. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, in terms of benefits of using rubrics, for students, rubrics make learning goals and instructor expectations clear and more transparent. So when students have rubrics at the start of whatever project they're working on, they can see how they're going to be evaluated from the get-go. And so they're able to, as they're working, these define some of the parameters of how they're doing the work. It provides students with more timely and detailed feedback, because it's easy to go through the rubric and either assign a score, check a box, highlight different aspects of a description. It makes the grading go faster. It enhances student learning for sure, because again, they're beginning with the end in mind, which is one of Stephen Covey's habits of highly effective people. And if used for grading, the grades feel less subjective and could lead to less grading complaints, because the rubric provides an objective measure by which all students are being evaluated. Now, for faculty, all of the things that apply to students also apply to faculty, and it also, the flip side of students getting the feedback in a timely manner is that for faculty, it saves time in giving feedback and grades to students. And, in the research on student evaluations, on course evaluations, timely feedback is one of the criteria that students use to assess faculty. Yes, Carolyn. Here.
I was also going to say, some of you probably know this, but research shows that it's really important for students to get feedback in a timely manner, that's how it's most effective. The longer students wait for feedback, it gets less and less effective because it's more distant from when they did the work. When I did grade way back when, I remember all this anxiety in grading, like, oh, I like this student, am I going to give them a B+ or whatever? But I feel like, having a tool like Rubrics, it can help the faculty member get a little emotional distance, and grading is emotionally and anxiety filled for students as well. And the more unstructured the grading is, I think the more anxious it makes students.
Okay, I want to focus now on the uses and types of rubrics. So on the uses side, rubrics can be used for formative feedback, summative evaluation, and program assessment. So formative feedback is about helping students learn while they're in process, right? So if you are giving them an assignment and you want to give them some kind of feedback before they're actually going to be evaluated, you can use rubrics to help communicate, hey, do more of this, do less of this is spot on, right? And it's a way for them to take in mid-process how things are going, how you think things are going with what they've submitted, so that when it comes time for summative evaluation, when you're actually grading the project, it's not a big surprise, right? It's not a surprise for you as the faculty member, and it's not a big surprise for the students, because you've already looked at what they're doing and you've given them some feedback along the way. And for those of you, I'm a big fan of giving verbal feedback, but then there's no record, right? When you're able to use a rubric, you're able to actually give them something they can hold on to, refer back to, right? And then, of course, program assessment. And we're going to talk more about that, but rubrics are really, really useful when you're doing that program level assessment.
I was going to add that, you don't always have time to review drafts with a rubric, but one of the useful things with a rubric is that students can use them to sort of learn how to evaluate themselves. So just by having the rubric, students can use the rubric with their work in mind to give themselves formative feedback, or perhaps it could be used in a sort of peer situation where the peers can use the rubric. So students are learning how to critique themselves, which is an important role they play in learning.
Now, there are multiple types of rubrics. We're just going to show you 3 popular rubrics today because too much choice gets overwhelming. So we're just going to share 3 today, and these are 3 that are often used when we are looking at program learning outcome reports that every department submits. These are also among what we see the most, okay? Holistic, scoring, and descriptive, and we're going to go through each one. Okay, so here's the first example. Carolyn, was there something you wanted to say about that? Okay, so here's the first, we're going to give you examples now. Here's an example of a holistic rubric that I have used. This is not the be-all and end-all of rubrics, but this was a great place for me to start. I'll read it to you. And this is literally like, I put this in the assignment to the students. FYI, in previous years, the most successful capstone teams validated every cost they could and stated their assumptions when a cost could not be validated. They provided a brief rationale for their pricing, and the sales revenue was realistic. For the break-even analysis, they included a table similar to Table 10.1 in the costing textbook, and some teams also included break-even and/or profit volume graphs. In contrast, the least successful teams did little research and made up many of their costs. They did not state their assumptions or provide much of a rationale for their cost or pricing decisions, and the sales revenue projections were unrealistic. These teams decided to use the mathematical formula for the break-even analysis instead of creating a table. Now, it really doesn't matter if you don't know about break-even analysis in finance. Like, that's what's not important. What is important is that I contrast, here's what's successful, and here's what's less successful, and here's why, right? Here are the things that I'm looking for that merit a successful outcome, and here are the things that I have seen that merit a less successful outcome. And we call this a holistic rubric because it's really, it's in paragraph form, it's, broad overview, and yet at the same time, it still gives students direction in terms of where they should go and where they should not go.
We can pass around a different example, that just if you want to see, but basically, yeah, the criteria aren't broken out. It's sort of one description for good, one description for bad. The example I'll pass around you can briefly look at just describes, what an A looks like, what a B looks like, what a C looks like. So it's kind of a starting point in providing general guidance for what different categories of performance look like, but without breaking down the criteria.
Yeah, so if you've never created a rubric, this was the first rubric I ever created, right? And it was based on my experience looking at papers in the past, looking at projects in the past. Now, this is the holistic grading rubric that I put in all of the syllabi that I have with students. And this is what I tell them in terms of their final grade, what the grades mean, right? So a grade of A or A minus means that you are performing in an exemplary way. What does that mean? For example, producing work or contributing in ways that could be used as a model for other students, thereby exceeding expectations to a greater or lesser extent. A grade of B plus B or B minus means you are meeting expectations. That is, your work and contribution indicate you are accomplishing the learning outcomes to a greater or lesser extent. A grade of C plus C or C minus means you are not fully meeting expectations, but you are demonstrating an emerging understanding of course concepts to a greater or lesser extent. And a grade of D or F means you are clearly not meeting expectations and your work is off target or missing. Now again, this is to just clarify for students so they understand, why did I get a B instead of an A? I did all the work. Yes, you did. You met expectations. Yes?
This is fantastic. Thank you. I just have a question also, because it's so much text for the students, from the student perspective again.
Yeah, I'm gonna, because we're recording here.
Sure. From the student perspective again, so do they really read also? This is my question. I know you probably will go into this because we have lengthy syllabi already where we have the assignments listed and everything. So isn't it really that students would take the time to read these up front, because it might be just for later, and then we set up ourselves. So I'm playing devil's advocate here, because, oh, it's written in this rubric, can you explain more deeper now, and why didn't you say this up front, and so on. So do we not set up ourselves a little bit? I'm playing devil's advocate.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because you essentially set up the answer, right? If this is meaningful, if you say this is meaningful and important, and then you don't spend time on it, no one's going to believe you, right? And so you actually have to spend time talking about the rubric, explaining what you mean. It's worth it. It's worth the time, right? A little less content, a little more understanding. Ooh, a little less content. Sorry. All right. Yeah. Yes, Jeffrey.
I just wanted to add that this slide actually should also have something like this in your syllabus, okay? And some people only have A equals 4.0 and so on. And we have examples that I can share if you want, as you will have these slides available to you as well. But this is not just for a rubric. This is actually to state the criteria for the course. And I recommend everybody at mid-semester, which is what you're hitting now, review the syllabus with your students. And if you don't have this kind of detail, see if you can get it into your syllabus by checking with your department.
I so appreciate your saying that, Jeffrey. And I think the thing is, folks, is that I want you to know, like, I've been teaching a really long time. And when I started, I just had numbers in my syllabus. And then I had exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, and a student said, well, how do I know what your expectations are? And I was like, well, gee whiz, we've been working together for a year and a half now. How could you not? But I said, okay, I didn't, it was a very valid question. And so then I sat back and I thought, okay, what does it mean to exceed my expectations? And I came up with this explanation. And so it's, like I said, it's an iterative process, and this is in my syllabus, and I always refer students back to it because it helps to kind of set their expectations that meeting the learning outcomes, that's a B, right? And so they know that up front from day one.
So Alex, one of the things I think you're getting at is that there are different types of rubrics, which is why we're going over the different types of rubrics. Sometimes the holistic rubric, won't be the best option. The holistic rubric has a very specific purpose, and we can talk about maybe some of the advantages and disadvantages of the different types, but when you're going to create a rubric, the first thing you have to think about is what kind of rubric is going to be best for, looking at this assignment in terms of what are the students demonstrating, what level of feedback do they need, maybe what level of sort of information do I need to get from their paper. If it's a small assignment, maybe you don't need to give that much feedback if you're just placing them in broad categories. So, the holistic rubric might not always be the best choice.
Okay. You know what? I like that we're engaging in lots of discussion because I think this is really important. I want to move on. This is a scoring rubric. This is an example of a scoring rubric, and this is, again, an early rubric that I developed where I essentially said to students, here are the 6 things I'm evaluating your team presentation on, and here's generally what I'm looking for, the possible points you can earn, and the points you actually earned. So I give this to the students when I give the assignment. Okay, and it has, I'll just read really quickly, strategy overview, business level strategy identified for each product and category and region, corporate level and multinational strategies addressed. 2 is company performance, all facets thoroughly explained. 3 is management team learning, thorough in-depth analysis of what you learned, both hard and soft skills from participating in the business strategy game, that's what BSG is. Future direction addresses not only past shortcomings of the management team and or strategies, but also current future competitive environment. 5 is about the slides, their appropriate creative representation of ideas and data. 6, individual evaluation, clear, effective, poised, fair share of time. And then I have additional comments. So they get this when they are given the assignment for the presentation, and then when I evaluate the presentation after they've made it, I type into each box specific comments, and I give them points earned, right? And then if I have additional comments, I put it at the bottom. So, and what's nice about this, it's very flexible. I don't have to type in comments. I can just give points. I can put in all my comments at the bottom, and so I like the flexibility of it. And again, this was an early rubric that I created, and I'm sharing this with you not because my rubrics are so be-all and end-all, but I want you to see there's different ways you can do it, and I really want to stress the iterative process. And so, to Carolyn's earlier point, you may start off with one type of rubric, start developing it, and then you're like, you know what, this isn't really what I should be doing, and then you shift to a different rubric, and that's okay too. Okay. Third, descriptive rubrics. Now, descriptive, not that my example is the be-all and end-all, but descriptive rubrics really are the gold standard for rubrics because they give the most information for each category, right? Each standard that you're being evaluated, that students are being evaluated on, and, backwards. These are the standards that they're being evaluated on, and here is the criteria. Now, the key thing here is that the description in each box, the differences between the standards in each box should be observable. It should be clear. And so what you end up having is, and this is really important, you want to look at your language. so that when you have exemplary, accomplished, emerging, and off target, for example, it's very clear what the differences are. This is hard to do, right? This is really hard to do. This rubric in particular, I'm not going to read you the whole rubric. Again, we're going to share this with you, and we're going to give you examples, and we're going to give you multiple examples of descriptive rubrics. But you can see there's a lot of writing here. And when I use this rubric, I will take a highlighter, and I'll just highlight different things as I'm grading, right? So I use this for papers. I have a similar one for presentations, and some of the things might be exemplary in content, and some might just be accomplished, and I can use a highlighter and just highlight what's what. This is really helpful. Students have told me, the first time I used this rubric, every time after, because I teach in a cohort, so I have all the same students, they kept asking me, do you have a rubric like the one you did before? Do you have one like that? Can we use that one? Right? And so I know that this is very helpful to them, and I continue to iterate it, right? It's, I'm so tremendously imperfect, right? So I just keep iterating and iterating. Carolyn, did you have anything you want to share here?
It's around one that shows how you can circle and highlight.
Oh, great. Okay, so Carolyn's going to pass something around to show how someone has actually circled and highlighted. We're going to continue to talk about descriptive rubrics, but I'm going to pass the mic to Sarah, and she's going to talk more about that.
Here, thanks. I have my notes. Oh, and the clicker. So this is a template that I made and that we're going to share with you. And just with none of the information filled out, but to point out the different parts of it, sort of its structure. And this is a little bit taken from my, so I have at the top, I use mine for grading, which not everybody does, but I actually do. And so I've got the student name and the course, the semester, the project, and then I have a score. And so sometimes, so I actually have scores, which we can talk about as well, but I took them out for this. But like Meg said, so we've got the criteria coming down in the left column, the standards at the top, and then the performance level description, as you saw, going back here in Meg's example. And so today when we're going to get to an activity soon, and I have a blank one of these so everybody can work on this. But to show you some other examples, here's one actually from the Writing and Speaking Studio about an oral presentation rubric. So you can see this is a little different, you know, each rubric, there's not only one way to do it. But again, and different, you know, they use different standards, but you can see also giving a number. And it is, one thing that is recommended is that you keep an even number so that you don't have an odd number and sort of default to the middle for everybody. So, and I do find that challenging, and like Meg said, circling different parts of her rubric, I'll show you mine in a second, but I sometimes draw arrows like, you're in between, you know, a 3 and a 4 or something. But again, this is one example done a little differently, but still the criteria are there and a description is there. There's just not a description of sort of the levels within. This is one of mine that I use for grading a handbag design project. And so this is how, and I keep it really simple. This is a continuing ed class, so you know, this is maybe the one and only handbag class they take. But what I think I've seen in other rubrics that maybe are not successful is making sure that the difference in performance level relates to the one, you know, higher and lower. So you can't have like a whole new criteria at number 3 that you don't have, you know, across your row. So like pattern making and measurements are neat and precise. Pattern making measurements are mostly neat and precise. They are not. Like, oh, some and most are not. So it's very clear. Pattern making labels are important in my class, and that's, you know, my standard there. And I always give feedback. Actually, I looked, Meg, and I can't even find them. So before I used Rubrics, I would go to the dollar store and I would buy receipt pads that had like duplicate copies, and I would write out. And I'd spend hours grading, writing all these comments and notes on all these categories, and this you did well, and this you did, and a grade, and then I'd rip off the top receipt and give it to the student, and I'd have the bottom for me. And I have books. Like, I don't know, I have so much stuff in my office, and it's one that I guess I don't have. But that was my way of like keeping a record and giving feedback. So I usually give feedback. I have these other boxes here. I give feedback here, and then like general, like specific pattern making feedback would go in this row, and then general stuff here. Here is, so I teach an online Illustrator Accessory CAD class in Blackboard. I'm not a pilot Brightspace user. So, but I thought it would be helpful for you to see my rubric in Blackboard. So I've got the rubric, which is in my syllabus and the students have access to, and it does go by grade range, and actually there are 5, although fail is the 5th. And they have percentage numbers that are built into the Blackboard, which you can adapt and change. There's a lot of flexibility in building out your rubric. But what I wanted to show you, because like I said, I use mine for grading, is that this is what it looks like when I grade the assignment. So I go to needs grading, I get the student's work, I have a preview of their work, and then I can open the rubric on the side. Now, I'm grading Illustrator work, so I actually have to open the file in Illustrator because to check what is necessary, but it is, so what I do is I tick off their grade, which the criteria, is over here. Not that I'm looking at this, I have it in my memory now, but I tick off their grade. I do give, there's a feedback area. You can do feedback under each category or one at the end. And then Blackboard tallies up the grade from from the percentages. So I love this because I'm grading it as I'm reviewing it. I can type a little bit of feedback. It tallies a grade. It goes into my grade book. When it's time for grading, Blackboard did the work for me. So I'm hoping Brightspace, which is Jeffrey's going to teach you all about Brightspace in his workshops, but I just wanted to show you in Brightspace, same thing can be applied, and you can create, this is what a blank rubric looks like, and these are just the steps to get there, but, and then I took my rubric from Blackboard and filled it in and just started a sample of, how I can create the same thing in Brightspace, sorry. But I find it really useful, and the students respond really quickly. So for my Illustrator class, I have an assignment every week. Speaking of timely feedback, I grade it every week. And if their grade is not accurate, or like sometimes I had a student whose file was kind of a mess, and so I gave him like a 0, and he quickly got that corrected file to me. He submitted the wrong one or whatever. So the instant feedback, goes far. So for today, we're going to do an activity. I'm going to make sure we have time. Yeah. So there's a copy that looks like this for you, and then a blank one for you to fill in. And I created a template in both Google Sheets and Google Docs. I don't know, people prefer different things. And so giving you the option, and if you have your computer, you can if you want to actually open it here and now, you can use these QR codes to get to them. So, the activity. Did anyone bring a rubric with them that they want to work on? Yeah? Okay, great. So we're going to work together, and we'll, the 3 of us will, and probably Jeffrey too, work around the room to help everyone. But these are the things you want to think about. So what do you want the students to learn? So starting with a good assignment is the key, is number 1. And then how and you want to relate that to your learning outcomes of the course. Shouldn't just be out of thin air that this, assignment and the rubric is. And then you want to, next we'll create the criteria. That's down the left-hand column. And those, maybe 5 or 6, would you agree? Like that is a good number? 4 to 6. Not, too many and not too few. My handbag one's really simple, but again, I'm telling you, it's also a 100 level course for evening students, so it's they're not here for a grade necessarily. But and then we're going to create the standards. Again, these are Meg was talking about the met standards, exceeded standards. These are the words that she's chosen, which I really like, and think I'm gonna, I got to edit. That's one of our mantras that'll happen today: revise and edit and iterate. So creating your standards, and then really creating the criterion that's going to be evaluated. Is it quality, quantity, frequency, impact, or consequence? It can be hard to write those, so hopefully by the 2 o'clock you'll have some, even if you start, and some people start with the very best, some people might start with the, very worst, and then fill in between, or go, depends on how you see it. And even giving your feedback in the way your rubric is set up, we talked about this, that, it's really best to have, because we read left to right here, to have the best on the left and going down, but there you'll see all different examples of whether it goes high to low or low to high. So then we're going to, so here we have start filling out with the highest, but maybe it makes sense for you to start with the lowest criteria or standard. And we're going to help you do that today. So do you want to add? Yeah.
So in terms of figuring out the criteria, sometimes it can help to sort of brainstorm. I mean, you'll want to be thinking about your learning outcomes and the learning that the assignment is supposed to demonstrate. But you might have noticed in some of the rubric examples, a lot of times you can sort of, group criteria into, an overall category. So,
yeah, actually, you have a good example.
Yeah, so, let's say,
like this here, the speaking, like if you're doing a speaking.
Okay, so speaking, criteria for oral presentation might include speaking slowly, speaking at the right volume, not going off track, and presenting a clear argument. So those could be grouped into criteria related to presentation and organization rather than having, a zillion different criteria. Jeffrey said one of his pet peeves that he sees a lot working in the CET is just a large number of criteria. But it's like overwhelming when students have so many different things. You think about them conceptually and how to group them, and then you notice in the descriptions, many of the descriptions may include multiple different elements in those sentences. So you might be talking about pacing and voice level and things that go together in the description. So often brainstorming, you can start to then refine into your criteria.
Do you want to say anything? Should we break out and start? I think so. Everybody have a pen? I have one. Pen, pencil, computer. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you can do it on your computer, you can do it on the handout. Do what works for you. On your rubrics or on your revisions. And I wanted to ask you, we didn't know what it was going to be like, so we thought, oh, well, now is the time to share. But it sounds like you're all sharing as you're going. So I'm just wanting to give you, raise your awareness, let's say, about the language that you're using in the qualitative rubric. Does the language for each standard clearly communicate differences in performance level? And the key thing to focus on is, are those differences observable? right? And so you should be able to show the student you got an exemplary for this reason and an accomplished for this reason, and you want, to the best of your ability, to have it not be subjective, but things that they can actually point to and say, oh, I understand why I got exemplary here and accomplished there. So that's the language is important. The other thing is, are you writing in student language, which means we're all experts in our field. And so we can use the language of experts very easily, but students can't. And so you want to make sure that you're using language that is clear to them, right? And so they'll be like, when they read that, they will say, oh, I get it, right? And then lastly, we really try to state our criteria positively, right, when possible. So, we want students, that's why we use the word emerging. And by the way, exemplary, accomplished, and emerging, I learned from the expert right here. I didn't make that up. I learned that from Carolyn. Much of what I know about assessment, I learned from Carolyn. And so it's important to, even when you're telling a student that they're just emerging or they're off target, here's why, but, I have confidence in you that you can learn more and do better. And so we don't want to be negative to students. We want to be supportive and encouraging, particularly in that formative feedback, right? So that they continue to feel motivated and engage with what they're doing. So if you haven't been talking at your table, I think everyone has, but if you haven't, please share what you're doing, share the language that you're using, and continue to work. And we'll work a little bit more, maybe for another 20 minutes, and then we have some final slides that we want to share with you, okay?
And I don't know how to forward this.
All right, don't touch anything.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully this has been useful. I know I've seen a lot of interesting ideas for rubrics and a lot of great, thinking about the criteria here. So a couple more things here. So best practices and resources. Rubrics, especially the descriptive rubrics we've been focusing on, are challenging. I think you'll use them, you will revise them, you'll use them again, you'll revise them again. It's great to, share your rubrics with other faculty for feedback. You could even share your rubric with students, ask them, is this clear? Are there things I should add? Are there things that they're not clear? You could occasionally even create a rubric from scratch with students. What's an excellent, what does excellent look like for this assignment? What criteria do you think I should be looking at? I mean, it can really help them think about, what are they demonstrating and doing in a particular assignment. But probably, you might do that after you've gotten more used to rubrics yourself a little first, maybe. But, certainly share a draft rubric with students, maybe. Provide the rubrics to students when the assignment is given out, since one of its roles is to help know students where to focus their efforts and, what you'll be looking for when you grade, if you're using rubrics while grading. We've got a lot of resources to help you with rubrics here. We've got the CET, and Jeffrey talked about the upcoming workshops on putting rubrics into Brightspace. I am the director of the Office of Academic and Administrative Assessment, so I am also, you can come to me if you want to work on a rubric at any time. We've got some information on rubric on the FIT assessment resources pages, and I think as CET, develops its website more, we'll have more resources there, and we've got our assessment faculty fellows for this year. We'll be having more assessment faculty fellows next year in case you're interested. This one? Yep. Okay. So we've been focusing on using rubrics for, giving students feedback and grading students. But one reason that I am interested in promoting rubrics and why people in the field of assessment promote rubrics is because rubrics are an excellent way to sort of assess a whole class of students and to use to assess a program or whether students generally are meeting, let's say, general education outcomes. So this is something, even if you're not involved in this in your programs, it could maybe help you see quickly how a whole class is doing in terms of your criteria. Now, I wrote this up when we were still using Blackboard, and now we're moving to Brightspace, but I expect there's a similar feature in Brightspace. So if you were, there is, Brian nods. So if you were using rubrics to grade your individual students, there's a way to aggregate their scores so you can see overall how a class is doing. So it'll give you a quick picture of, are there areas where my student, that I have to emphasize more in class, especially if you did this for an assignment earlier in the term. If you did this at the end of the term, then maybe you could think about this in terms of, the next time I teach that class, where should I focus my efforts? So this is just a made-up example using the writing rubric, and here you might look and say, I can see that, language is looking a little bit lower here. Only 3 students did excellent, 10 did, 10 were good, more approaching, more needs improvement. You can see most students can get the purpose, so it helps you look at an entire class. And there are other ways of putting together that data as well that depending on your inclination and your sort of math skills, you may or may not do, but you could come up with averages. You can think of in terms of, what percentage of a class sort of met or exceeded your expectations, how many students or percentage of a class, did not meet expectations. So this is often a way that rubrics are used at FIT to look at a whole program. For example, it's common in art and design programs that rubrics will be used for capstone projects, so that at the time students graduate and they do one of these major culminating projects, if rubrics are used, can then figure out for our graduating students how many of them met or exceeded our expectations at the time of graduation. So thank you for coming today. We've put together a little survey here, which you can use this QR code to get. And I think any of us are happy to work with you one-on-one, at any time. Any last questions or words? Okay then, well, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Say a couple of things really quick. Thank you for coming to this event. After spring break, we have another event planned on student presentations, so that'll be assigning and assessing student speaking and student presentations. Steve Keating will be our guest host for that event. And then later in the semester, we have an event called Tutor Perspectives that we're doing in coordination with the Writing and Speaking Studio, and that'll be our peer writing and speaking consultants talking about their experiences working with student learners, especially around issues of neurodiversity and inclusive learning. And I think it'll be a great event to attend. We'll have cookies at that one. So that's in addition to all of the Brightspace stuff to be on the lookout for. All of this information will come out of our office in the weeks to come. So if you have any questions, please do get a hold of me. Thank you.